It's true. The Altered Marketplace is open, and I bought everything. Ayo, what up? It's Billy Quick. Welcome back. In my last video, I showcased a collection visualizing tool that I've been using, so I'll have a link to that video here. Well, here it is, showing my collection stats. It's true. I now own a full playset, or 3 of every card, in the first set of Altered's Beyond the Gates. The whole process took me several hours, so I'm going to go over what my experience was like, how much it ended up costing, positives, negatives, and some concerns that I have. I maybe should have already mentioned this, but before I had access to the marketplace, I purchased 5 display booster boxes of the first set, and that put me somewhere around 87% of rares. Now, notably, that's only owning 1 copy of each of those rares, so what's not listed here is that I now own 3 copies of each of those rares, so I had to buy a ton of copies. Based on how long it took me, not needing nearly the entire first set from the marketplace, I could not imagine doing the entire process there. And I'll go into why in just a little bit, you'll see. Well, let's get started with the cost. For the numbers, I'm going to exclude things like taxes and shipping. Those vary drastically based on where you are, so we're just going to go completely off of what I paid or the sales price. The day I was introduced to the game, I was in Chicago for MagicCon back in February. I bought 3 starter decks and a display booster box of Beyond the Gates from a game store there named Prism Games, shout out. They pitched the game to me, I fell in love, and so had to buy some product. I dug through my credit card statements to find out how much I paid and did some backwards math to remove the sales tax, and I found out that I paid $188.61 for everything. So this would mean it's almost exactly MSRP for these things, counting $144 for the box and roughly $15 per starter deck. Personally, I was really interested in the Lyra starter deck, which turned out to be a mistake, but that's not for this video. I do still love Lyra, Navinka, and Blotch. Great hero. Once I got back from Chicago and I was heavily infatuated with the game, I then found a store online, the Gamers Guild in Arizona, shout out. They were selling Beyond the Gates display booster boxes for an absurdly low price, for what almost seems like an impossible number, at $67.56. Now, don't get me wrong, I am all for supporting your local game stores, but when you find prices and deals like this, it just does not make sense when your local game store is selling these same boxes for more than double the price, especially when shipping is free from Gamers Guild over a certain number. Well, regardless, these 4 boxes came out to $270.24. Now, this next bit is a little negligible, but since I'm being pretty thorough, I attended 7 Altered events between February and now before I got access to the marketplace, and 2 of those were drafts. The other 5 were constructed events. So the drafts were $20, the constructed events were $5, and I acquired at least some rares from those events as I picked Beyond the Gates as most of my prize pack choices, so I'm going to count these. This now brings our total up to $523.85. Now onto the marketplace, I made over 400 transactions. Now you can see this number right above my head here. It's going to be really small, so I'll try to zoom in. I made over 400 transactions and spent a total of $122.97 to finish out my collection. That brings our final total to $646.82 to acquire the entire first set, or Beyond the Gates, for the Altered trading card game. Granted, if you were someone going through and buying the entire first set on just the marketplace, this cost would be much, much cheaper for you. But you would also only have digital copies of these cards. I now own most of the first set physically without having to do print-on-demand orders. Now let's talk about some of the positives of this marketplace. Going for the obvious thing here, it's now easier than ever to acquire the cards that you want. Find a deck that you might be interested in on 39 cards and just put it together. The local scene in my area is relatively small, so in the last few months I've been playing Altered, acquiring rares has been difficult to say the least. I probably traded less than 10 cards, and that's mostly because I was trying to go for a full collection of the first set. I actually managed to find some stats from the boxes, the 5 booster boxes that I opened, that I mentioned earlier, and I opened 285 rares. Different rares in those boxes. And of those, I only managed to have more than a playset, or 4 copies or higher, of only 15 of those rares. So those extras are what I'd be looking to trade since I'm going for a full collection of the entire set. But when your trade binder averages, 3 copies of a card for each faction, you have slim pickings. One of the next positives is I did not find a single card out of stock, not counting alternate arts, of course. I was only going for the base set things. So every single card from the first set was available to purchase, and most of my purchases were made during the closed beta, so I expected at least some gaps, but was pleasantly surprised. On to the third positive, most prices are extremely low. Most rares average around 10 cents, with some of the most sought after ones like this one here, the Mage Dancer that's played in the meta deck Aphanis, goes for more than $1, and I think when I purchased it, it was slightly higher than this. But now that we're in open beta, prices are going to come down. So moving on to some of the negatives, because there are a lot of negatives sadly, but purchasing multiple copies of a card is it's a really rough user experience. You can only select more than one quantity if a seller is selling more than one quantity. So let me give you an example of this Mage Dancer here. So if I select this Mage Dancer, you can see there are 3 sellers here, all at varying prices, that show they have one quantity of this Mage Dancer available. So for instance, if I had 0 in my collection and I wanted 3 copies, I would then have to click through buy here, confirm this purchase 3 separate times. And now each time that I do that, I have to click 4 or 5 more times. I have to wait for this to load. Prices are going to vary wildly. Ideally, I think this flow should look like I click on one of these cards either through this buy button or this Mage Dancer here, preferably from buy, and I can just select the number that I want here, and it tells me how much they cost. Because if we're trying to be user-friendly here, just let me select the 3 cheapest options and let me buy them this way, rather than having to go through and click through multiple different menus to acquire 3 copies of one card. I understand what they're going for when you select this menu. You kind of want to be able to select the different sellers here, but there's no way to identify if this is a friend or a local game store or something. Really, this should just be, this is the going price for this card, let me buy as many copies of them as I can, or what they're listed at. On to another negative, which is because all these cards are listed by individuals at whatever price they want, this could likely lead to a very volatile market, and theoretically nothing is preventing people from buying up all copies of a card and reselling them for much higher prices, besides the tediousness of going through and clicking buy for all of the offers. In this case, there's only 22 offers of this card, and it's likely that some of them are going to be much more expensive as people list them for $20 or more. But if I wanted to buy all $1 copies of this card and relist it for $15, there's nothing preventing me from doing that. So we'll have to see if there's people that try to take advantage of this marketplace and scalp, as people like to say. Now on to what I think is one of the worst negatives for the marketplace and what I had the biggest pain point in when I was trying to purchase this entire first set. So as a collector myself, I'm trying to acquire all of the physical cards of this first set so that I can play them in paper and attend my local game store events. For me, I enjoy shuffling physically and going to in-person events. I like that social aspect. So trying to acquire all of these cards and then place a print-on-demand order was extremely, extremely tedious. And let me show you. So I've created a new print-on-demand order to show you what I was going through, but let me give you a quick walkthrough without actually buying a card. But in this case, if I were purchasing more copies of this Mage Dancer and I wanted them physically, I would have to go through and buy as many copies as I'd like individually from this menu. And then I would have to go to create a new print-on-demand order, add a pack here and click plus. I'd have to then search for the Mage Dancer. I'd have to find the one that I was looking for, so correlate it here. Select it, whatever quantity that I'd like to print, and then make sure that it populates this pack. And now, since I'm trying to acquire 3 copies of a card, these packs are only 20 cards. Well, 20 is not a multiple of 3. Meaning you have to make extra packs if you're trying to get 3 of copies of cards. Now, that's not the worst part. The worst part is if I already own 1 or 2 copies of a rare, it's not clear to me how many of these copies I own in paper. So it is unclear if I'm going through this list and I'm just buying up copies of rares. Do I have to make a separate list of cards that I have not placed in a print-on-demand order yet? There's no way to differentiate these from a physical collection versus digital collection. So I think something that could greatly improve the user experience here is show me cards that were recently acquired. Maybe on this print-on-demand screen, have a separate column where you just bought, these 35 cards in the marketplace. Do you want to print these? I'm not really sure this is a fixable problem because I think it would be extremely difficult to notate if a card was scanned or traded or acquired from the marketplace. And then it becomes really messy trying to determine what physical copies you own. So personally, I'd recommend just going through and organizing your entire collection. I've spent countless hours myself organizing binders and boxes full of cards. But like I said, I'm someone that's going to go to physical events and play a bunch of decks. So if that's not you, then maybe this isn't a problem for you. Now on to the last negative, which I think is going to be absolutely critical for marketplace success in Altered, is going to be searching for uniques. Because right now, if I go to search for a unique, there are a lot of filters that I can apply, but none of them give me text options. So for example, if I'm looking for a Ysmir unique that does something when you sacrifice it, for Lindaway, if you've watched any of my previous videos, there is no way for me to filter this by cards that have the sacrifice word in their text box. So I would just be expected to scroll through 1,000 results and just click through each one and look for the word sacrifice. To me, this is totally a miss and absolutely something that needs to be solved before this is out of open beta. There are some ways to filter. In this case, there's a keyword option here, but you can't search for things like sacrifice. There's no results. You also can't search things like sacrifice in this box, because this is just looking for the names of a card. I think this is absolutely critical if you're looking for a card for your deck, for instance Lindaway, because most of the money that Equinox is going to make from these purchases are going to be from uniques. Like we were just talking about, the rares on this marketplace are pennies, nickels, dimes. So if people are selling uniques, which are the chase cards, for 40, 45 bucks or more, there have been way more expensive uniques than that. Equinox is taking 5% of every transaction here. And so most of their money is going to be coming from searching uniques and making this a good experience. I'll stop harping on the negatives. That's it for now. Let's move on to some concerns that I have. You may have already put this together with some of the things that I was mentioning earlier, but playing Altered digitally is going to be significantly cheaper than playing physically, a fraction of the cost, really. If you have access to the marketplace yourself, you can see that every common is listed at the minimum price, which is 5 cents. So if you're buying 22 commons for your deck, that's $1.10. And you're buying 15 rares, which we've already talked about, average somewhere around 10 cents. That's $1.50. Now, if you're playing with uniques you already own, or just some of the cheapest uniques you can find, you can buy an entire deck for less than $10 and play it online. This is incredible. You know, there's no other card game where you can spend $10 and have a perfectly playable deck for a digital client. And just out of curiosity, I'll put it on the overlay of this video once I'm done filming, but I want to see how much the Meta Aphanis or Sigismar deck costs, and I'll just give you a total price just based on marketplace costs. Now, if I wanted to take any one of these decks that I'm talking about building digitally and print them, assuming I don't own these cards already, it would take me 2 packs from the print-on-demand order to have the entire deck printed and shipped to me. Now, 2 packs is at minimum $40. You can see here, 1 to 2 packs is $20 a pack or $1 a card, which is already significantly more expensive than playing digitally. Like we were just saying, the majority of your deck is going to be commons that are 5 cents a piece. So paying $1 per card is a drastic increase in price. And this doesn't count shipping either. So to play paper Altered after spending pennies, nickels on your digital copies, you'd have to spend 20 times that amount of money to play physically with these cards that you want. And this just gets me worried for physical Altered because the scene near me is already relatively small. And so for the digital version to just be even that much cheaper than the physical version, this is going to even further incentivize people to not play physically, with how cost prohibitive the physical copies of cards are going to be. Now, I did do a print-on-demand order because I'm trying to collect a physical collection of all of the first set. Because there's not a way to organize it, like we've already talked about, I had to make a Google Doc here showing all of the cards that I need to order at some point, creating packs for my next print-on-demand orders. In hindsight, this would have been better to put into Google Sheets so that I can actually see the quantity and determine how many packs I'm actually going to need, but now I know what cards that I'm going to need to purchase because I don't own these in paper. And I hope that really drills down what I was talking about earlier, because there's no way to differentiate this. I can just see that I own these cards, but I don't know if I have a physical copy or not without doing something like this. But once my print-on-demand order gets here, I'll be doing a follow-up video and I'll show you what that looks like when it comes in. And I think that just about does it. So if you have any comments, concerns, or questions for me about the marketplace or print-on-demand, make sure you let me know and I'll see you in the next one.